From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Olumide Macaulay.
Hello and welcome. Tonight, Senate makes shocking revelation over mismanagement of funds at the Niger Delta Development Commission. Reps to take legal action against Niger Delta Affairs Minister over contract allegation, but Senator Akpabio denies making comments, insists he was quoted out of context. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 allays concern over Nigeria's access to vaccines, considers restructuring its activities to reduce risk of infection amongst members. And thousands more COVID-19 cases reported in the U.S. as country inches closer to 4 million cases. Plus, business and news from Abuja, the FCT, and later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, federal government launches the Agriculture for Food and Job Plan to mitigate the negative impact of COVID-19 on the economy and food distribution in the country.
On sports news tonight, California State Athletic Commission confirms former heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson will return to the ring in September.
And from Abuja, remains of Nigeria's first female combat helicopter pilot, Tolulope Arotile, laid to rest at the National Military Cemetery in Abuja.
We begin with the alarming discoveries and recommendations from the Senate committee investigating the management of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, as it submits the report of its findings today. Senators say NDDC spent 1.3 trillion naira between 2015 and May the 31st, 2019. They also discovered that 4.9 billion naira was paid between October 2019 and May 2020 as allowances, including COVID-19 relief, tour duty allowances, overseas travel, and international scholarships during the lockdown. Funds must be paid back. Another critical decision contained in the report is that the presidency shall take over the supervision of the NDDC. Meanwhile, their counterparts in the House of Representatives say they are filing a suit against the Niger Delta Affairs Minister, Godswill Akpabio. Our correspondent, Linda Higbe, reports on the activities in both chambers of the National Assembly today.
The National Assembly's investigation of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NEDC, can be likened to a blockbuster. From fainting spells, back and forth allegations and walkouts, it's been equal parts fascinating and disturbing. After all the drama, the Senate Ad Hoc Committee investigating allegations of financial recklessness in the NDDC presents its report before the Senate, which details the inefficiencies and corruption in the commission. The NEDC spent 1.3 trillion naira between October 2015 and May 31st, 2019, with some of these spendings outside budgetary provisions.
We found out that the fiduciary record of the tenure of the IMC since October 2019 has not shown any evidence of performance enhancement, efficiency, or prudence in the application of resources committed to the NDDC. The ministerial oversight has been consistently weak and inadequate, therefore making the Ministry of Niger Delta culpable of negligent supervision. It will amaze us that the state of implementation of that forensic audit is at very, very rudimentary stages of recruitment of auditors in the 8 months of the existence of the IMC.
A passionate debate begins among lawmakers.
Today we are fighting corruption, but corruption is still expanding. So what's the solution, Mr. President? We have to introduce either Mosaic law or Sharia law. Amputation, life imprisonment. Let us look at the law when we come back.
Mr. President, if you had watched the public hearing a few days ago, with the kind of contents in this report, why won't the man faint? We must also blame ourselves, because this is a clear case of lack of oversight. The saddest part of what we are discussing is that there is no any demonstration of concern from the people of Niger Delta.
The Senate recommends that a sum of 4.923 billion naira paid to NEDC staff and contractors in breach of procurement process and approvals should be refunded to the NDDC account with immediate effect. The upper chamber is also recommending the dissolution of the Interim Management Committee of the NEDC and that the commission be taken from the Ministry of Niger Delta and returned to the presidency.
Mr. Speaker.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives Committee on NEDC is beaming its searchlight on another development commission, this time in the north. The House is to investigate an alleged mismanagement of 100 billion naira by the Northeast Development Commission.
The 100 billion so far disbursed to the commission by the federal government is said to have vanished under a year without any visible impact on the refugees nor any infrastructural development credited to the name of the commission in the whole of the Northeast.
The lower chamber is giving its committees on finance and Northeast development an 8-week deadline to undertake an extensive investigation over these allegations. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives today made good its threat to file a legal suit against the Niger Delta Affairs Minister, Mr. Godswill Akpabio, 48 hours after he failed to publish the names of lawmakers he claimed received contracts from the NDDC. The House had issued a 48-hour ultimatum to the minister on Tuesday, and at today's plenary, the Speaker, Honorable Femi Gbadabiamila, directed the Clerk of the House to issue a criminal complaint of perjury and civil defamation suit against Mr. Akpabio. Our correspondent Terry Kumi reports.
On the fourth day of the investigative hearing of the House Committee on NDDC, which is investigating the financial irregularities in the Commission, the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs was involved in a back-and-forth argument with a member of the committee.
Wait, you were a member of the NDDC in the 8th Assembly?
He made serious allegations against the National Assembly.
I just told you that we have record to show that most of the contracts in NDDC are given out to members of National Assembly, but you don't know about it.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. The two chairmen can explain to you.
The following day, during plenary, the Speaker of the House of Representatives reacted to the allegations and issued a threat to the minister.
I will take this matter and this allegation and accusation very serious. And I will give the minister 24 to 48 hours. And Clerk, I want you to back this up with a letter from this House. Give the minister 24 to 48 hours to publish the names, the contracts so given, the dates, because obviously these things will be documented.
48 hours later, with no response from Senator Godswill Akpabio, the Speaker made good his threats.
I've asked the Clerk of the House of Representatives to engage the services of legal counsel and instruct them to initiate a criminal complaint of perjury against the minister. At the same time, we will instruct counsel to explore the possibility of a civil defamation suit against the minister.
Moments later, he receives a communication from the minister.
It has always been known that the two chairmen of the committees on NDDC in both chambers yearly exhibit unusual influence to the exclusion of committee members and even the management of the NDDC in appropriating funds to details embellished in the budget after passage of line items at the plenaries. I never referred to members of the 9th National Assembly as beneficiaries of NDDC contracts.
Senator Godswill Akpabio also insists that he will not make public the documents since they were received from the lead forensic auditors in confidence. The Speaker further directs the House Committee on Ethics and Privileges to study Senator Akpabi's response and advise the House on the next line of action. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Staying with the House of Representatives, the lawmakers want President Muhammadu Buhari to reinstate the suspended management of the Nigeria Social Insurance Trust Fund, NSITF. The House made the resolution when it adopted the report of its committee, which investigated the arbitrary breach of presidential directives on the suspension of top management and executive committee members of the NSITF and other government agencies by ministers. The committee had asked the House to declare that the procedure leading to the suspension of officials of the NSITF are in breach of the Nigeria Social Insurance Trust Fund Act. Also at plenary today, the House mandated its Committee on Police Affairs to investigate the circumstances surrounding the invasion of the home of former acting managing director of the NDDC, Joy Nune. The Deputy Majority Whip, who raised the motion, queried the move behind the invasion. She claims the action was done to prevent her from giving her testimony before the House Committee on the NDDC. Away from the House of Representatives, the suspended acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu, has not submitted his defense to the presidential panel investigating him. His lawyer, Mr. Wahab Shitu, told Channels Television that they arrived at the villa at about 9:30 a.m. today on the invitation of the panel, but the panel did not attend to them even until 7 p.m. when it concluded sitting for the day. Mr. Magu had arrived at the venue with a view to submitting his defense with certain annexures, but he was unable to do so since the panel did not attend to him. The panel had invited him on Wednesday, saying that it would confront, or rather receive his defense. The lawyer added that he will return with his client to the villa again tomorrow. To the courts. The Federal High Court sitting in Lagos has upheld a fundamental rights enforcement suit instituted by the human rights lawyer Femi Falana over the planned implementation of the Operation Positive Identification by the Nigerian Army. Justice Rilwan Aikawa held that the Nigerian Army has no power under the Constitution to subject civilians to such positive identification. While dismissing the objections of the Attorney General of the Federation and the Nigerian Army, the judge held that the applicant has the locus standi to have instituted the suit. The judge also ruled that the fundamental rights of the Nigerian people to liberty and freedom of movement will be breached by the planned positive identification. The senior advocate of Nigeria had filed the fundamental rights enforcement suit on the October the 25th, 2019, against the planned exercise by the Army scheduled to hold from 1st November to 1st December 23rd, to December 23rd, 2019. Mr. Falana asked the court to halt the implementation of the exercise, arguing that the operation is unconstitutional, illegal, null, and void. To politics, a former Commissioner for Justice and Attorney General in Ondo State, Mr. Eyitayo Jegede, has clinched the ticket of the People's Democratic Party for the October 10th governorship election in the state. Mr. Jegede polled 888 votes to defeat his closest rival, Mr. Agbola Ajayi, Deputy Governor of the state, who had 657 votes. The Deputy Governor had defected from the All Progressives Congress last month. A former Southwest chairman of the party, Eddie Olafisho, came a distant third with 175 votes. At the end of the exercise, which went into the early hours of today, the candidate and the chairman of the election expressed satisfaction with the process. Meanwhile, as the politics in Edo State shapes up, it's a moment of sober reflection for former national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Adams Oshomole. The former Edo State governor says the negative things he said against the current APC governorship candidate, Pastor Osage Yamu, during the 2016 elections were mere political statements meant to only promote the aspiration of Governor Godwin Obaseki during that election. Comrade Oshomole said this as he arrived in Benin City, the state capital, today, to a reception by APC supporters.
I have watched some videos where they are showing what I said of Pastor Ezeyamu when I was marketing Obaseki. All right. Let me speak to that briefly. When you are selling Toyota, you cannot promote Mercedes. If you tell the people Mercedes is better, they will touch your Toyota. I've heard some people saying, how can a man who was qualified to be governor in 2016, they now say he's not qualified in 2020. Now, as the governor, I never had cause to ask GO, where are your certificates? I believe him on his face value. This is probably my fault.
In part two, after the break, Lagos COVID-19 cases to peak in August. State government warns against the use of rapid test kits. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television, Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Senate makes shocking revelation over mismanagement of funds at Niger Delta Development Commission. Reps to take legal action against Niger Delta Affairs Minister over contract allegation, although Mr. Akpabio insists he was quoted out of context. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to restructure its activities to reduce risk of infection amongst members. And thousands more COVID-19 cases reported in the U.S. as country records over 4 million. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. The European Union and the government of the United States have condemned the recent killing of aid workers shot dead by Boko Haram insurgents in a video released yesterday. The EU said in a statement that it's shocked by the gruesome murder of the humanitarian workers by the abductors, adding that there is the need for adherence to international humanitarian law and the safeguard of human rights. It adds that conflict is not an excuse to breach these rules and target humanitarian workers and civilians. On its part, the United States Embassy in Nigeria says it's saddened by the execution of the humanitarian workers, noting that these brave individuals had dedicated their lives to easing human suffering. Meanwhile, some officials of the Nigerian Correctional Service in Plateau State have been attacked by gunmen in Barakin Ladi local government area of the state. The gunmen are said to have set free 6 of the 10 suspects who have been taken to the State High Court for different crimes ranging from murder to kidnapping and even rape. Authorities of the Nigerian Correctional Services say investigations has already begun into the matter, while police have arrested some suspects in the area. And now to join our studios in Abuja for more stories. Here's Linda Ahigwe. Hello, Linda.
Hello, Lumide. Welcome to Abuja. The president is currently in Mali, where he's meeting with some other leaders of ECOWAS in their search for a solution to the political crisis rocking the country. President Muhammadu Buhari is attending a meeting in Bamako alongside former President Goodluck Jonathan, who is the special envoy chosen by ECOWAS to mediate in the crisis. This is the president's first visit abroad since the outbreak of the coronavirus, and he's spotted with a face mask, which he's seen to be wearing for the first time. Earlier in the week, former President Jonathan briefed President Buhari on the political situation in Mali after leading a team on a peace mission there. The president tweeted afterwards that some ECOWAS leaders, led by the chairman of the Authority of Heads of State and Government of a sub-regional organization, and President Issoufou Mahamadou of Niger Republic, all agreed to meet in Mali. The president is expected to return to the country on Friday. 230 cows impounded by the Benue State livestock guards for violating the Open Grazing and Ranches Establishment Law of 2017 may be auctioned anytime from now. The Benue State government has threatened to take this action if the owners of the animals fail to meet the conditions for their release within 7 days. The Guards commander, Mr. Linus Zaki, told journalists in Makurdi, Benue State capital, that the leadership of the Mieti Allah Cattle Breeders Association had called to claim the animals but may lose them if they fail to do so within the stipulated time. The law provides for a fine of 2,000 naira per animal per day, and the longer the animals remain impounded at a livestock holding facility in Makurdi, the more they have to pay. The remains of late flying officer Tolulope Arotile, the first Nigerian female combat helicopter pilot, has been laid to rest at the National Military Cemetery in Abuja. The burial was restricted to a few guests, officers, friends and families of the deceased in strict compliance with laid down principles of COVID-19. The Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, eulogizes the late flying officer who he says contributed greatly to the decimation of insurgents in the northeast. Air Marshal Abubakar says the Nigerian Air Force is still in a state of shock over the death of a young officer who was accidentally killed by a car on the 14th of July 2020 in Kaduna.
It's a solemn gathering as the ambulance conveying the body of late flying officer Tolulope Arotile arrives at National Military Cemetery in Abuja. Funeral rites commenced immediately with a faith service led by the director of Nigeria Air Force Chaplaincy. His message focused on the righteous dying.
The prophet Isaiah cried out on the fact that nothing seems to bother the society when those who hold the promise for tomorrow are vanishing, and no one seems to bother or worried. The prophet describes them as righteous, men and women that are godly, men and women that are respectful, men and women that are committed to doing good, men and women that live a godly life, men and women that cheat no one.
She was enlisted into the Nigerian Defense Academy, Kaduna, as a member of 64th Regular Corps on the 22nd of September.
After the citation, a member of her family pays tribute to the sterling qualities of the late officer, just as the Chief of Air Staff reels out her achievements.
As a child, Tolulope had always dreamed of flying a plane. At that age, her aspirations were blurry. But today, we can gladly all testify to the impact she has made, not only in the Nigerian Air Force, but among family members, friends, colleagues, and the entire nation.
As a combat helicopter pilot for several years, I can tell you that this young and confident first female combat helicopter pilot in the history of the Nigerian Air Force braved so many odds to get where she was before her demise.
In line with military tradition, a national flag is presented to the family of the late flying officer. With a minute silence in honor of late Tolulope Arotile, the casket is lowered.
Man born of the woman has been a short hand to list. And soon he comes up.
Followed by a laying of wreath by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Defense and other dignitaries. A 21-gun salute also rents the air. The National Military Cemetery is a place reserved for outstanding military officers, and having written her name in gold as Nigeria's first female helicopter combat pilot, late Tolulope Arotile joined other departed heroes to rest eternally in the nation's capital, Abuja.
The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says it might consider restructuring its mode of delivering some of its activities by relying more on technology to reduce the risk of members contracting the virus. The task force suspended its briefing on Monday after the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is a member of the task force, announced via his Twitter handle that he has tested positive for COVID-19. Meanwhile, the Minister of Health, Dr. Osagi Ehanire, informed the gathering that results have shown that the Madagascar herbal mixture has no curative powers for COVID-19.
Presidential Task Force on COVID-19.
It's exactly 1 week since the last time members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 addressed journalists in this hall on the national response for the virus. At the resumption of the briefing on Thursday, July the 23rd, the task force chairman explains why the briefing was suspended for a week, just as he announced plans to reduce physical contact in the activities of the task force going forward.
On Sunday, 19th July 2020, the dangers that our frontline workers face on a daily basis was forcefully brought to our consciousness when the tweet from the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is a member of the Presidential Task Force, went viral. That singular piece of information in the public space is sufficient proof to Nigerians that the virus is real and does not discriminate. The Presidential Task Force might reconsider restructuring the mode of delivering some of its activities, relying more on technology to minimize the risk associated with unavoidable physical contacts.
The Minister of Health also speaks on the final report of the Madagascar herbal mixture by the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, just as he also allays fears about Nigeria's preparedness to access some of the vaccines that are showing high potency against COVID-19.
The National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, NIPRID, has now shared its final report on the evaluation of the COVID-19 organic from Madagascar. While the preparation at high dose showed activity in reducing frequency of cough, it did not show any evidence that it has a real curative property against the COVID-19 virus. His Excellency the President has started an initiative by which the African bloc of countries should work towards getting access to vaccines. That initiative is ongoing to be able to make sure that Africans are not shortchanged when vaccines do come out.
COVID-19 cases recorded in Nigeria in the last 1 week fluctuates between 500 and 700 cases daily. The Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control highlights the government's efforts to scale up testing for the virus.
So far, we've tested 250,000 people. We have the capacity at the moment to test about the same amount with reagents in the country already. So pushing very hard to keep increasing those numbers and increase the efficiency of testing.
Nigeria has only tested 247,825 samples from its estimated 200 million population. Many believe strongly that the government needs to create more awareness about testing and win the confidence of the citizens in order to get more people tested for the virus.
When the News at 10 returns, federal government launches Agriculture for Food and Job Plan to mitigate negative impact of COVID-19 on the economy. That's some business news. Join us again.
Welcome back, and we continue with our coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. Health authorities in Lagos say by August, the state will reach its peak of coronavirus cases. The State Commissioner for Health, Professor Bayomi, says any private health facility found conducting COVID-19 tests without approval or using rapid test kits will be sealed.
COVID-19 numbers in Lagos are increasing every day, with 13,543 cases till date, fueled by community transmission, which the state health authorities are battling to curb the spread.
7 private laboratories.
The State Commissioner for Health, Professor Bayomi, believes Lagos is nearing its peak, which is expected very soon.
We're still seeing a gentle increase in the number of cases over time, cumulatively. According to our modeling, we expect that Lagos will theoretically peak in the month of August, and then it will flatten out, and after some time, we will start to see a decrease in the number of cases.
Lagos remains the epicenter of the virus, with Etiosa, Alimosho, Koshofe, Ikeja, Oshodi, and Isolo local government areas the worst affected. While testing will be carried out in these areas, the government will still spread sample collection across all local council development areas.
We had already established 20 decentralized sample collection points, but we're going to make those 20 collection points a lot more efficient and a lot more active. And indeed, we're going to increase that to 57. Once you're discharged from our isolation center, we monitor you, and we're planning to monitor you for up to 6 months and perhaps a year.
Another burning issue is the fate of students who remain at home due to the closure of schools. The government says there is no decision on resumption.
There is yet no date. How Lagos is going to cope, considering the number of pupils and students that we have. I assure you that as soon as the go-ahead is given for schools to be reopened, Lagos is going to cope.
As the Lagos State government continues to battle with the pandemic, residents are advised to continue to adhere to safety guidelines put in place by the authorities. Titilayo Aberewo, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the federal government says it's opening its doors to the international community in the implementation of the National Economic Sustainability Plan. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, mentioned this today during a virtual meeting with representatives of the international community from the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, agencies of the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. He applauded the commitment of the international community to support Nigeria's response to the pandemic, noting that the country will take advantage of the crisis to effect significant changes in the critical sectors of the Nigerian economy. Now it's time for business news. Here's Anne Wanwado.
Thank you, Olumide. Hello and welcome to Business News. We begin with the federal government's launch of the Agriculture and Food and Job Plan, which is a major takeoff for the agriculture components of the Nigerian Economic and Sustainability Plan. The project, which is a target at smallholder farmers, is expected to mitigate the negative impact of COVID-19 on the economy and the livelihoods of farmers by creating more access to food production, processing, and distribution in Nigeria. At the official launch of the program in Katsina State today, the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Mr. Muhammad Nanono, highlighted its deliverables, which includes the creation of between 5 to 10 million jobs in the agri sector, financing loan to farmers at zero interest rate, production of about 10 million metric tons of food, among other things. The governor of Abia State, Okezie Ikpeazu, has assented to the revised 2020 budget of 102.6 billion naira recently passed into law by the State House of Assembly. He was speaking after signing the revised budget at the Government House in Umuahia. He also mentioned that Abia, like other states across the country, is facing economic stress as a result of COVID-19. However, Governor Ikpeazu highlighted some of the measures taken by his administration to mitigate the effect of COVID-19 on the economy, with emphasis on improvements in agriculture and industrial production, adding that all hands must be on deck to secure the socio-economic future of the state. South Africa's central bank has cut its main lending rate further by 25 basis points to a record low of 3.50%. And this is just coming as the governor of the Reserve Bank, Lesacha Ngiango, mentioned at the end of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting today that the country's economic future remains bleak due to the devastating impact of COVID-19. It's the third time since April this year that the rate has been reduced as the country seeks to recover from the COVID-19 lockdown imposed over 3 months ago. In a recent poll conducted by Reuters, 13 out of 28 economists surveyed had expected a 25 basis points cut. MTN Nigeria says it expects its profit margin to dip by almost half a percentage point this year as a recent devaluation of the naira by the Central Bank of Nigeria takes its toll on its leased tower services. In a statement released today, the company explains that the dollar conversion rate used by the local subsidiary of the South African Telecoms Group weakened by 6.5% to 385 naira, which of course will reduce its 2020 data margin by approximately 0.4% under IFRS 16 financial reporting rules. In the meantime, the company's share price rose 0.84% to 132 naira at the close of trading today on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And talking about the Nigerian Stock Exchange, more than 176 billion naira, that's the amount that's being added to the stock's overall value at the NSE, records its first gain for this week in the flat markets. But let's hear more from Chimeze Obiwagu.
Thank you and welcome to the Stock Market Report. You can never say never when it comes to the equities market. Anything can change the dynamics of the game, and that's what has happened today. Dangote Cement was the bride of the market. If you would recall, the management had notified the exchange of a share buyback. Perhaps that's what lifted its stock price. The stock gained 10% today, pushing the industrial sector up as much as 3.26%. But if you look at the sectoral chart, you will see more of the red arrows. And what that tells us is that investor holdback is still prevalent in the market. No aggressive buy or sell yet. Take away Dangote Cement's gain, the market would have been in red, but thanks to this cement giant, the overall index ended in the green, a whopping 1.40%. It was as high as almost 2% at a little past intraday, but for its contemporary Boer Cement, which turned out to be the spoiler with 1 naira 45 kobo loss. And it looks like the volume and value are becoming inverse to the overall market performance. Today, while the index is up, activity looks subdued and opposite of what we saw yesterday. Let's not be deceived. Caution remains the watchword for investors, particularly with the unimpressive earnings so far. But like I said earlier, as long as this market is concerned, anything can happen. We can only hope for the best. And that was the Stock Market Report. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu.
And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. The rest of the news at 10 continues with Olumide.
Thank you, Anne. The Cross River State Governor, Professor Ben Ayade, has promised to change the deplorable living conditions of host communities of the Obudu Ranch Resort in the Obanluku local government area of the state with the provision of social housing. Governor Ayade, who made the promise during a one-week working visit to the Obudu Ranch Resort, during his tour of the communities, expressed sadness over the abject conditions highlighted by shanties and dilapidated structures.
Obudu Mountain Resort in Obanluku local government area of Cross River State is known to be a destination of choice for tourists in Nigeria and from other countries. With a peculiar weather and friendly environment for holidays, the resort offers scenic views of nature and wildlife. But taking a walk away from the resort, there appears to be a sharp contrast with the residents of the host community living in dilapidated homes, exposing them to the harsh weather conditions.
It's not easy. You can see the place is very local. We don't even have toilets. We don't have bathroom. When it is raining, we have to stand under the rain there before we can take our bath.
Before you can even get something to eat or even walk, it's not easy. So life here is very stressful, but if the governor wants to make a change about it, I'll be very, very happy.
Governor Ben Ayade wants to change the narrative and goes on a one-week tour of the communities.
These are the original aborigines, the original owners of the Obudu cattle ranch, relegated to the worst form of existence, reduced to want in body, in spirit, and in soul, in the most subhuman living condition, collapsing roofs with huge, massive temperatures that run your blood chilled and your bones cold.
He promises to build social housing for the people.
As government, we're committed to bringing social housing to change their course and prove to them that God acts through human beings. In the next 6 months, we'll be here and you'll see the difference.
It's one of the latest projects of the Ayade administration, which aims to end the suffering of the people who live around the Obudu mountain resort.
Still ahead on the news at 10. Thousands more COVID-19 cases reported in the U.S. as the country records over 4 million cases. Plus, more stories from our London studio and around the world in 5. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Many U.S. states are setting new records for coronavirus cases as the country records over 4 million cases. States like California, Missouri, North Dakota, and West Virginia have recorded their highest daily infections, while Alabama, Idaho, and Texas reported new record highs in daily deaths. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. US President Donald Trump has announced that a surge of federal security forces will be sent to US cities in a crackdown on crime.
Extreme politicians.
Chicago and 2 other Democratic-run cities are being targeted in the Republican president's move amid a spike in violence. But federal deployments in Portland have proved controversial. Local officials have said they have raised tensions amid ongoing protests.
Today I'm announcing a surge of federal law enforcement into American communities plagued by violent crime. We'll work every single day to restore public safety, protect our nation's children, and bring violent perpetrators to justice.
Latin America has continued to be one of the worst affected regions of the coronavirus pandemic, with more than 4 million confirmed cases. Argentina has reached a new daily high with 5,782 confirmed infections in just 24 hours. The majority of them were in the capital, Buenos Aires, and surrounding areas. Meanwhile, in the capital of Colombia, a rotating lockdown has been enforced. Bogotá residents living in 7 neighborhoods, which have been under lockdown for the past 2 weeks, have been allowed to resume their lives as normal, while those of 5 different neighborhoods will go into lockdown for the next 2 weeks. Australia has reported its biggest budget deficit since World War II as the coronavirus crisis has knocked the country into its first recession in 3 decades.
The impact of the coronavirus.
Despite government support, real GDP is forecast to have contracted by 7% in the second quarter, though activity is expected to pick up in the current quarter. While antivirus restrictions have broadly been eased across most of the country, the city of Melbourne has been seeing a spike in infections. Thousands of Spanish Airbus employees have gathered outside a factory near Madrid to protest against a restructuring plan that will see hundreds of jobs lost in the country. In June, the company announced it would cut 15,000 jobs from its global workforce after the coronavirus pandemic halted most air travel. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has said the government is working with Airbus to find ways to keep jobs in the country, but so far no details on any rescue plan have been released. China has successfully launched an unmanned probe to Mars in its first independent mission to another planet in a bid for global leadership in space and a display of its technological power and ambition. The probe is expected to reach Mars in February, where it will attempt to deploy a rover to explore the planet for 90 days. If successful, the Tianwen-1 will make China the first country to orbit, land and deploy a rover in its inaugural mission. Hong Kong residents with British national overseas visas will be able to apply for citizenship from January 2021. That's according to an announcement by the British Interior Minister. The decision, which could see nearly 3 million Hong Kong residents settling in Britain, comes after Beijing imposed a national security law on the former British colony. The Chinese embassy has said that Britain had made the decision despite opposition from Beijing, and China would respond strongly if it was not reversed. In Somalia, users of the narcotic cat leaf have been suffering from withdrawal symptoms after most imports were halted following the ban of international flights to curb the spread of coronavirus. Somalia is a major market for cat, which has grown in Kenya's fertile highlands and driven to Nairobi airport soon after harvesting to keep it fresh for consumers abroad. The price of the leaf has surged to as much as $300 per kilogram from $20 a kilogram when the flights were stopped. This has put the commodity out of reach for most of its users and has put pressure on psychiatric emergency hospitals treating users with withdrawal symptoms. Meanwhile, Qantas Airways' last Boeing 747 jet has drawn a kangaroo resembling the company's logo in the sky off the Australian coast as it began its final flight to retirement in the Mojave Desert. Qantas 747s carried more than 250 million people in almost half a century of service, including Queen Elizabeth II and every Australian Olympic team since 1984. Qantas was once the world's only airline with an all 747 fleet. And finally, to celebrate their 10-year anniversary, the boy band One Direction have launched a special website full of behind-the-scenes content, a montage video, and remix versions of their biggest songs. The boy band, who have been on a hiatus since 2015, broke their 2-year Twitter silence to announce the new site. Harry Styles, Niall Horan, Liam Payne, Louis Tomlinson and former bandmate Zayn Malik have all become household names in the past decade, and fans are hopeful of more music to come after rumours of a reunion later this year. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Many thanks, Simon. Time now for some sports news. The California State Athletic Commission has confirmed that former heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson will return to the ring in September for an exhibition bout against fellow legend Roy Jones Jr. The fight will take place at the Dignity Health Sports Park in California, with the fighters using 12 ounces gloves. The president of the National Association of Nigeria Professional Footballers, Tijani Babangida, has reiterated that the union will ensure domestic league players get improved welfare package. The former Super Eagles forward, who was speaking to Channels Television via Instagram, advised clubs in the country to stem mass exodus of players abroad by fulfilling their financial obligations to their players. The Nigeria Football Federation Ad hoc Committee on Safety and Security has recommended that Nasarawa State Football Association be suspended from hosting all matches. This followed the death of Nasarawa United defender Chineme Martins during a league game in Lafia in the month of March. The committee also recommended that Nasarawa United pay a fine of 10 million naira for non-compliance with club licensing regulations and violation of rules. 9 arrests have been made in Liverpool as thousands of fans gathered outside the stadium on Wednesday to celebrate their club's title triumph, despite warnings to stay at home. Merseyside police introduced a 48-hour dispersal zone around Liverpool's Anfield Stadium during the club's match against Chelsea Football Club. And that's a wrap on Sports News. I'm Ayotunde Balu. Thank you, Ayo. And the main news again. The Senate today made a shocking revelation over the mismanagement of the Niger Delta Development Commission. It recommended the immediate sack of the Interim Management Committee and asked the presidency to take over the suspension of the ministry. Also today, the House of Representatives declared it has initiated legal action against Niger Delta Affairs Minister Godswill Akpabio over his failure to supply the list of lawmakers he claimed benefited from the NDDC project, but the minister said he was quoted out of context. And that's it on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Do have a good night.